You know, we were just renting. We knew we wouldn't be there forever. We did things like we went to Mr. Thompson and asked him if we could glean the cornfields after they had collected corn with their machines, and he said sure. So we got a couple of burlap bags and went out and picked up all the corn cobs that the machines had missed, and that was more than enough to corn for the supplemental corn for Marlena for the whole winter. I cracked it with an old meat grinder.
And I did that for the ducks, so
yep.
it worked great.
Yep. And
now when we moved to California, my office was right next to a cherry orchard.
Yeah.
And that's all changed.
They paved it all since then.
Yeah, we moved in 1978.
Was 18 months old.
Yeah, so we moved in 1978, and all around me was cherry orchards. Down the street a little way was an HP operation. Every place that you see, if you would see today in San Jose, that's all high-rise and high-tech companies, was all
farms.
It was
mostly orchards in that area.
Yeah, a lot of orchards and small vegetable farms.
Yeah, yeah. We used to go down to Blood Alley to
which was down towards Watsonville.
Right, they called it that because the roads were in such bad shape. There was so much congestion there that it was a disaster.
There were a lot of accidents.
But we used to go down there because the streets were lined with veggie stands, and we'd pick up like strawberries that were ripe. So they couldn't sell them in the grocery store because people want stuff that's not going to spoil in a half an hour. But we'd pick them up ripe, go home and turn them into jam.
You would have to do that day because they were really on the edge.
Yep, and there were places along the side of the road then where they had full-size walnut trees that we would take paper grocery bags, because that was when grocery bags were still paper, and we would fill them up to the top with walnuts. And then in the evenings we would sit there and crack walnuts while we watched TV.
Yeah, we used to watch the quail come in and eat the cracked acorns on the street corners.
Right. Well, wherever you had the big oaks, the cars would roll, right over the acorns and crush them. Well, then because a quail can't open an acorn, they're not like a woodpecker, but they could eat the squished acorns on the street. It was very funny.
While we were in San Jose, I started my first company. I wrote the business plan. I recruited the other two founders, and it was a computer company. And that was really kind of my first entree into green money isn't always green. Sometimes money comes with a lot of baggage.
Well, we learned the foibles and problems of dealing with venture capitalists who could be brats, like children, sometimes. And just one person screwed up the whole scene.
Yeah, the person who was putting in a $50,000 investment, which is the third round of the company, who had originally been our investor, one of our investors, decided on a multi-million-dollar financing to not put the money in, and he called the banks and said, I'm not putting my money in the bank. So
everything collapsed. It's like a house of cards.
And I was busy selling scrap paper on Christmas Eve, which was not fun, but it was educational. It was definitely not a good time. We then moved to Texas. Because I had the opportunity to go to work for Texas Instruments. I knew the executive vice president of the company. They had a very good impression of me, and I was brought in to help market a specific product they were having.
And to update some of their stuff.
Yeah, the company was in transition from what it had been to what it was going to be. And along the way, you can have some fallout. And I decided to go do some other work for the company in Boston. And I moved Irene and the kids to Maine for 1 or 2 years.
2 years.
While I worked in Massachusetts, commuted to Maine on the weekends, and then moved them down to Massachusetts, where I worked running an operation for analog devices. we then took another opportunity to move to California.
Right. Well, we had our own business again by that time.
I was consulting, and Irene was working with me the entire time up until that point. She was a contract technical writer for many different companies. So she put her academic skills to work.
As a tech writer for years and years and years.
So back to California, and I went to work for, at one point after I'd been consulting, I was an expert witness at trial in a big patent suit. Worked for a lot of different companies, and went to work for one of my long-term clients and helped them create a patent portfolio of a large number of patents, which then made them attractive to a company that was going to buy them. We bought some property in California. It was a unique opportunity. We bought 53 acres on top of a mountain that could overlook Monterey Bay, or actually Santa Cruz Harbor. We worked on that property for the better part of 3 years. We cleared a bunch of invasive broom, which is a invasive brush, and
took down a bunch of dead trees. We had a lot of standing dead trees up there.
We spent way too much money on plans and permits and everything else, and everything got in place just in time for my company to eliminate a large number of positions, including mine, which meant now I had a problem. I had a balloon payment due on the property that was supposed to be rolled into a construction loan, which I couldn't get because I had this lack of job.
Right.
So we ended up selling that property, did not lose money, which was good, and took what money we had and we bought property here in Arizona. The plan originally had been to use this as a base of operation and a storage facility for a lot of stuff. We'd planned to go on the road with our RV and do remote work.
Right. He was working as an editor for, I don't remember the name of the company now. It was a magazine, online.
Electronic Design.
Yeah. And which is a well-established magazine. You've been working for them for a couple of years.
Actually quite a long time. I wrote more than 400 articles. I have a whole stack of plaques somewhere in storage of the covers of the various articles that I did.
Right. And magically they disappeared. I mean, they just plain don't exist anymore. And they were a long, well-established company. Yeah, that was one of those.
They just now have an online presence. It's all online. There's not a huge amount of money in it. Oh well, that happens.
Yeah.
So along the line, both of us picked up a lot of different skills. One of the opportunities that Irene had when she lived in Maine was she took a home building class.
Yeah, owner builder class
from Shelter Institute. That was in Bath, Maine at the time. They've now since moved to Wiscasset.
Yeah.
And they focused on building timber frame structures.
Right. But they taught you all the basics of timber frame and regular stick-built stuff. All the things you need to know. You did site visits to see houses that had been built using their techniques. You learned all the basics of wells and basements and, all the things
septic systems and building trusses.
And, all the kind of things you'd need to have for your basics. So that even if you were not going to do all the construction yourself, you would know enough so that you were less likely to get ripped off. Because that's a big thing. I mean, it's kind of like when I took driver's ed in high school. We had to learn basic mechanics because they didn't want you getting ripped off by some car mechanic who would tell you that your thrust converter was not working and you needed a new, whatever the heck.
You need a new Framistan.
You need a new Framistan, and gee, I didn't think my engine had a Framistan in it. I mean, we looked at a vehicle when we lived in New Mexico.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. This woman had graduated, and she'd left her vehicle behind because she had graduated. And
nice car. Really nice car.
Decent. Not high-end, but decent.
Nice on the outside, nice on the inside, not heavily used.
Right. It was not abused. She was not a crazy driver or something like that. But when we started hearing stories about her personal knowledge level, one time she couldn't get the car to start, and she had a friend come over to take a look at it. Well, somebody had stolen the battery out of it. And she's like, "A battery? I thought it ran on gas." And just about then, we decided we weren't going to buy it. It was a little on the high side anyway, but she was willing to finance it. But when we heard that she didn't understand the concept of a basic combustion engine with gas and oil and stuff like that, we said, chances are she's just been adding oil. She hasn't been changing oil. So, you know, the things that you need that little bit of extra input into your brain to say, don't do it, step back. Yeah, that was one of those moments.
Yeah. So we bought the property here in 2004, and I spent 4 months shuttling between here and California. There was a 1950s mobile home on the property. Mm-hmm. It was in sad shape. Mm-hmm. Nothing in it worked. Well, I guess the stove worked. Mm-hmm. The wood stove.
Yeah. The wood stove worked fine.
So I had to fix everything else. I had to fix the plumbing, I had to fix the water, I had to fix the sewer, I had to fix a bunch of the electrical. Mm-hmm. I made it
functional. That was a darn comfortable mobile home. It really was.
Functional is the right word for it. It was not really comfortable. Most people who were coming out of the suburbs would look at that and say, oh no. No.
I thought it was perfectly comfortable. You could heat it, you could cook, you had a refrigerator that worked. Now, it was a little old-fashioned one like my grandma had, so it didn't, you know, it didn't chill things down as fast as you'd like. In the summer, you had to buy ice. You couldn't make your own ice. But the stove was a good stove. We actually kept that stove for quite a while, even after we...
Yeah, the gas range, we did.
Yeah. And we used it here while we were waiting for our stuff to be done. And then we gave it to a friend to use afterwards.
Now, to put it in perspective, when Irene says it was pretty nice, we just spent 3 years living in our 26-foot motorhome, mm-hmm. which is... She could touch both walls if she stretched her arms out. Mm-hmm. So it had one bedroom. It was a full-size, almost a full-size mattress. It's a little bit shorter. Mm-hmm. And a wet bath, mm-hmm. a stove, and a refrigerator. And we lived in that for 3 years before we moved here. Mm-hmm. And then we lived in that and the mobile home. The mobile home was great in the wintertime because...
You could heat it really well.
Yeah, and that was good because it had the wood stove. And Irene, and this is really all her, she cleaned up around our house site because there was a lot of dead wood on it, so she cut it up and she burned it.
Yeah. What I do is I go out every day and I had a couple of milk crates and I'd fill them up with just sticks and stuff that were all over the ground, making it look sloppy. And I'd pick up all that stuff, and then the bigger stuff I had a bow saw. I would cut that up and stack that, and you always had wood stacked there so that it was drying more inside. Because just any wood that's in contact with soil will have a little bit of moisture even here. And yeah, I cleared up the whole area nicely so that there was no junk all over the place. Yeah.
My background with heavy equipment would come in when we moved here, mm-hmm. because I had a good idea about how much turnaround space a tractor trailer would need, how short a turn radius a box truck could have. How short a turn radius a box truck could have. Oh boy, hiccups. I had a good idea about the turn radius of a box truck and how I could make it easier for people who are going to deliver supplies out here.
Right. We watched another YouTube channel a couple of years ago. It had been a dry season, and they had relied strictly on water collection. Well, that's great when you have a normal year. You still require, in this part of the United States, a huge volume of water storage, even if you're not going to bathe very often or, things like that. But they wound up in trouble because they hadn't thought about how you're going to get a water truck in to your area, and then they had they crammed everything together tightly, and the guy was barely able to get a hose in there to put water in. So when you're laying out, you need to look at, in our case, we put the water tanks up on the top of the hill because that makes sense. You've got gravity in your favor when you're building the water system. We do have a pressurized system, but if we had to, we could do with less pressure and it would still function. The ability to have more space around it means that you can bring as many trucks in as you want. And the guys from Home Depot and stuff, when they were delivering wooden things, they loved us because it would be like, oh yeah, my husband used to drive a bus and a truck, so he knew exactly what he was doing when he laid out the roads, and everything was in loops. And if there was a section where you couldn't loop or you had to back, there was plenty of backup room. And they loved it because they would park the semi in the south yard, offload the forklift, take the supplies off, dump them in the backyard there, and put it back together and zoom away. No problem. None of this getting wedged into a spot.
So I designed the foundation for this house.
Mm-hmm.
I helped create the foundation, but I wasn't here for some of it. And
No.
It took 6 months to get the final concrete for the flooring done because we had a lot of rain.
Yeah, it was a rainy season, so they poured half of it, and then the intent was to pour the other half, and then they had so much rain that the concrete trucks couldn't get in because the main roads are crappy.
So then it took time for that to happen. Then Irene and I built the house. We did most of the stick framing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I had somebody who used to work for me in California doing maintenance work come to be a caretaker. And he worked a small number of hours per week for us in return for his place to live here on the property.
Mm-hmm.
We built the walls. We built the... we did all of the plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
We did all of the electrical.
Right.
Now the only plumbing we didn't do is I hired a commercial contractor to come in, commercial plumber to come in and plumb the utility rooms so that the manifold for all the heat that can circulate through all our convectors is done the right way. And then the only problem that happened was I was gone and he left out 2 very important valves.
Right, and then we discovered later, we actually used it for a while, but we discovered later that the pump that you got is undersized.
The recirculating pump,
Yeah.
the recirculating pump for the longest run of hot water to the kitchen,
Right.
won't lift the water up
Yeah.
as high as it needs to. You know, we did all the lights in the house. We've installed all the gas appliances. We've installed the pellet stove.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that we have, we've done. And a lot of that comes from Irene's experience. A lot of that's come from Irene's experience with the Shelter Institute class because she knew how it was supposed to be, and she had decades of experience using hammer and nail and screws and screwdriver and
Well, and just silly things like I had the old Reader's Digest How to Replace Things and Repair Things book that they used to sell through their Reader's Digest book club thing. And I think I probably still have at least one of their books like that. And it was basic things like how to take a faucet apart and replace the innards on a faucet. So we'd have a leaky faucet, and I'd go look it up. And then you start taking the faucet apart, and you figure out how the faucet is put together, because there's multiple options. Especially in those days, some used packing, and then others used washers and stuff like that. And you'd figure out what you needed, and go down to the hardware store and buy it, and magically you didn't have a leaky faucet anymore.
Yeah, Irene did a lot of the stuff while I was at work, a lot of times without me knowing about it. There was one day when the radiator on our single car had a leak, and there was, I don't remember if I got the radiator.
You got the radiator delivered to the house by a parts store.
Right.
I waited until the baby was down taking a nap. I took out the old radiator and put in the new radiator.
I was going to come home and put the radiator in.
I got it done by the time he got home, and then it was just a matter of we needed the antifreeze and stuff like that, and have you double check it, and it was fine.
So that's
it's just a radiator. It's not brain surgery. It's not like taking apart a transmission and having to line things up and get your splines right on your stuff, and none of that stuff. No, this is a radiator.
a lot of what we've done has been because we've been willing to try.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned a lot of things along the way, especially living here in a more remote area. You know, right now I have our range apart because I have to replace the thermostat in the oven. Well, one of the things I discovered is that the instructions to replace this silly little thermostat requires me taking the entire top of the range apart. So what I'm doing now is going through the documentation to figure out what else I need to replace while I have it apart, because it's going to be hours to take it all apart.
Yeah, and my view on this whole thing is we have a propane stove in the truck. So if it's not done in time for dinner, no biggie.
We have a way to cook.
We can cook. It's not a big deal. The world won't end.
Well, this is a pretty long session about how we got where we are. There's a lot more. If you have questions about anything that we've talked about so far or anything else, drop them in the comments below. We're happy to try and answer them, or do try and answer them. This is going to be out of sequence with everything else we've been doing. I decided to slot this in to the finishing of the greenhouse and some other repairs we had going on because it seemed like a good time.
Well, we tend to flop back and forth between projects anyway. You know, it's like while I was sitting there doing lunch, I was flipping through some stuff, and I'm sure you thought I was goofing off on Facebook, but I wasn't. I was doing research on a couple of things I need to make.
Yeah, we very seldom just goof around.
So I've had a couple of specific requests, and I was coming up with documentation.
Well, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications, because there's more stuff coming on the greenhouse. There's more coming about the lithium-ion battery in the utility building that I just got the parts for. And there's more coming about what I'm doing with the range, because I have another part coming in tomorrow. There's more going on in the greenhouse. Irene went out and did some stuff to try to keep the rats out. There's more going on in the studio.
So I just set a bunch of rat traps today.
There's more going on in the studio. There's more repairs going on with the rover. Tons and tons of stuff.
And it's supposed to start raining next day or so here. You can see the clouds are there. It smelled like rain this morning, but you couldn't see any on the ground, so I suspect it rained early and then evaporated. But it did smell like rain.
Say goodbye, Irene.
Okay, until next time. Bye.
Bye. Keep brainstorming.
Yeah, obviously we are.
Yeah, and it's going to storm outside.
Yeah.